The 10. In 2010, an unidentified serial killer was apprehended. What began as a probation violation soon escalated into a full-scale investigation when police in Reno, Nevada, discovered Joseph Nasso's list of 10. Joseph Nasso, born on January 7, 1934, in Rochester, New York, has a relatively unknown past. Little is known about his childhood or early adulthood except for his service in the United States Air Force. In 1958, Nasso was charged with assault and attempted rape in East Rochester. A 21-year-old woman managed to escape him and reported him to the police. The woman recounted they had met at a dance on the evening of April 24th. She was waiting for the bus when Nasso pulled up and offered her a ride. She accepted and got into the car, where Nasso drove them to a park. He then pulled over and attacked her. After his arrest, Nasso pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison. However, his sentence was later suspended, and he was placed on probation for 5 years. While in Rochester, Nasso was charged again, but police chose to run him out of town instead of imposing any consequences or disciplinary action. After being expelled from New York, Nasso traveled west. During this time, he met and married his wife, Judith. He adopted the persona of a professional photographer and often offered his services to women. Nasso had a specific preference for photographing women in hosiery and high heels. Judith divorced Nasso after 18 years of marriage, but they remained close for the sake of their son, Charles. When Charles, who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, was in his mother's care, Nasso would take the opportunity to visit Rochester. Despite being expelled from town, he had friends and family there whom he would regularly visit. During one such visit, 3 young girls were found murdered in the Rochester area. The murders gained various titles, but most recognized them as the double initial murders. They were called the double initial murders because the first letter of the first name and last name of each girl matched: Carmen Colon, Wanda Walkowitz, and Michelle Maynes. In the 1970s, Nasso took various classes at colleges around the San Francisco area. In the 1980s, he lived in Piedmont, California, then moved to Sacramento between 1999 and 2003, before finally settling in Reno, Nevada. Nasso had a long history of petty crimes, including petty theft and shoplifting, which he committed until 2010. In every place he lived, he exhibited reclusive and odd behavior. In Reno, his neighbors knew him as Crazy Joe. In 2008, Nasso was convicted of theft at the age of 74 and sentenced to probation. In April 2010, he came under police scrutiny when they were tipped off that he was selling ammunition at flea markets and fairs. Since this was a violation of his probation, a routine check was issued on his home. During this check, police were horrified by the state of his home. They found it in abysmal condition, with piles of objects strewn all over and rotting meat left out on the kitchen counter. It looked like the home of a hoarder. While investigating the incident, police discovered bullets inside the home, which confirmed that Nasso had violated his probation conditions. Consequently, he was promptly arrested. As Nasso was being transported for intake, officers continued to search his home. They were unaware of the extent of the discovery they would make. Nasso had stored numerous banker's boxes in his home. These boxes contained photographs, journals, newspaper clippings, approximately $150,000 in cash, and various forms of identification, all taken from several women. Upon viewing the photographs, the officers searching Nasso's home were shocked and disgusted. The images depicted women in various states of undress, typically wearing hosiery and high heels. However, the most concerning aspect was that most of the women in the photographs appeared to be completely unconscious or dead. In addition to the photographs, officers also found numerous volumes of journals. These journals were not dated like a daybook or diary. Instead, they appeared to be someone's scribbled notes as they recalled events. While the sheer number of journals was overwhelming, their contents were even more shocking than the photographs. For a long time, Nasso had been recounting tales of the women he had attacked, sexually assaulted, and killed. The earliest incident occurred in the 1950s in Rochester, New York. The journals also included what would become the infamous List of 10, which precisely described a horrific list of 10 women Nasso had killed. 6 women have been identified as victims of the same crime. On January 10, 1977, the body of 18-year-old Roxanne Ragash was discovered near Fairfax, California. When police arrived, they found 4 pairs of nylons on her. 2 pairs were wrapped around her neck, while a 3rd pair was stuffed in her mouth. Roxanne was also wearing the 4th pair, which unfortunately had semen stains. On August 13, 1978, the body of 22-year-old Carmen Lorraine Colon was found near where Roxanne had been located. She was discovered just a few miles away between Crockett and Port Costa along the Corquenza Scenic Highway. During an autopsy, nail clippings were taken, which appeared to contain skin cells underneath. In 1981, the body of 56-year-old Sharia Laferne Johnson was found washed up on the shore near the Naval Net Depot in Tiburon, California. Sharia had recently moved to the San Francisco Bay Area in search of employment. At the time, Nasso managed the building complex where Sharia resided. Despite being considered the prime suspect, police were unable to gather sufficient evidence to officially arrest him for murder officially. Renee Shapiro, who later changed her name to Sarah Dillon, met her tragic end in May 1992 while on her way to a Bob Dylan concert in San Francisco. Her body was discovered near Nevada County, California. A year later, in 1993, 38-year-old Pamela Ruth Parsons was found murdered in Yuba County, California, the same county where Nasso was living at the time of her murder. In 1994, a 31-year-old Tracy Lynn McKinney Tafoya was also found sexually assaulted and murdered in Yuba County. Her body had been left in the newly established Marysville Cemetery. Of the 10 women whose bodies were found, 4 remain unidentified, with only vague descriptions of their whereabouts and identities. The journals provided crucial evidence that linked Nasso's list of 10 to 4 women, with 2 potentially being the victims of Nasso's crimes. On April 11, 2011, Joseph Nasso was charged with the murders of Roxanne Ragash, Carmen Lorraine Colon, Pamela Ruth Parsons, and Tracy Lynn McKinney Tafoya. However, prosecutors were unable to gather sufficient evidence to charge Nasso with the murders of Sharia Laferne Johnson or Sarah Dillon without a reasonable doubt. While incarcerated, Judith visited her ex-husband, Nasso. During their visit, Nasso requested that she ask their son, Charlie, to see his house. Inside the house, Charlie would find the keys to a safe deposit box. Nasso intended for Charlie to retrieve the personal items within the box and keep them safe. Judith recorded the conversation and the police promptly returned to Nasso's home, which was still under investigation, to retrieve the keys. Upon finding the keys, the police discovered additional photos and pieces of identification inside the box. Notably, they found Sarah Dillon's driver's license and passport. They also found a handwritten note that included the date of the Bob Dylan concert Sarah had planned to attend. During the trial, the prosecutors presented a comprehensive case presenting nearly all the evidence they had found in Nasso's home. This included photos, the journals, and various pieces of identification. Their most compelling piece of evidence was the infamous list of 10. The jury listened to the brief descriptions of the women Nasso had attacked, the locations of their murders, and other snippets from the journals Nasso kept. They were also presented with Judah's DNA on a pair of nylons found on Roxanne's body, suggesting that Nasso had used a pair of his wife's hosiery to commit murder. Subsequently, the prosecution presented conclusive DNA evidence found under Carmen's fingernails, which traced back to Joseph Nasso. Following this, prosecutors also swore in several survivors who recounted surviving their attacks at the hands of Nasso, spanning 20 to 30 years. In a display of poor decision-making, Nasso opted to represent himself at trial. He frequently appeared confused and disgruntled, swearing at the jury and making derogatory remarks. Although he did not testify himself, he did call 5 witnesses. His sole closing argument to the jury was that he had not harmed the women he was charged with murdering and that he was not a monster. On August 20th, 2013, the jury convicted Joseph Nasso of all 4 murders with which he was charged. On November 22nd, 2013, he was sentenced to death. As of September 2022, he remains on death row. As Nasso's crimes came to light, the press couldn't help but notice a pattern. The first and last names of 4 of his victims had also matching initials. Some couldn't help but draw a connection between these murders and the double initial murders in Rochester, New York, which occurred between 1971 and 1973. Nasso was known to be in the area during the time these murders took place and had been considered a suspect. Additionally, one of the victims in New York shared a name with one of Nasso's victims in California, Carmen Colan. For all practical purposes, it was reasonable to believe that Nasso was the perpetrator of these murders. However, DNA evidence collected in New York did not match Nasso's DNA, thereby exonerating him as a suspect of these murders once and for all. Despite being proven innocent of the New York double initial murders, Nasso remains responsible for the murders of 10 women between 1977 and 1994. These likely represent only his top 10 crimes, as there's a possibility that he may have committed murders in the past.